Hi, everyone. I'm back for us to take the next step in creating our editorial design layout in InDesign. This week's assignment is to create a magazine spread. And before we can actually start placing content into our document, we need to set up our grid, our underlying structure that's going to help us organize the content in our layout. The underlying grid is in part to help us maintain structure on a multi-page document to sort of create consistency. But it's also super helpful even in this case where we're only going to be creating one spread for this assignment because it will give us some guidelines in terms of where to place things. So I'm here in the new document window. I've set my specs here to match the specs of the assignment. So the width is 8.25 inches. The height is 10.75 inches. These dimensions are selected because then it gives you the option to print this with bleeds on an 11 by 17 sheet of paper, which is a really common, easy to access paper size. Make sure that you have your orientation set to portrait or vertical, and that you have the facing pages checkbox checked. I'm starting out my document with 4 pages as well. You're going to need at least 4 pages to create that spread layout. So go ahead and put that in now. You'll remember from the last video that columns, margins, bleeds, all of that can be entered now, or you can update that later. But go ahead and give yourself a few parameters. So I'm starting out with 6 columns and a margin of 1/2 inch. My bleed is 1/8 of an inch or 0.125 inches. Remember, the bleed is that little extra guideline around the outside of your document for anything that you want to print to the very edge of the page. All right, and I have my preview box clicked so I can actually see this, what this is going to look like, and I will click Create. Okay. Now, to create the grid for my layout, I am going to go to my parent pages. I want the components of my grid to appear on the layout pages for the whole document. So anything I put on my parent page is going to appear on my content pages that I see down below here. So double click on A-parent. I do want to note that in older versions of InDesign, this was called the master page. So if you're looking online for videos on how to do this, or more information about creating layout grids, you may see it referred to as the master page. In 2001, they changed that to parent page. All right, so my layout grid is started already. Because I entered some parameters into my new document window, I have a set of margins and I have 6 columns here. I chose 6, not because I actually want really narrow columns of text, but because I want to divide my page up into a variety of possible columns. So in a 6-page or 6-column layout, I can do 3 columns that each stretch across 2 of these. I can do 2 columns that stretch across 3 each. I can have a wide column that stretches across 4 with a sidebar column that's 2 wide. Like there's a lot of options here. As long as I have that underlying grid, then I have all those different options throughout my publication. If you want to change them at this point, you're going to go up to the top of your screen and go to the layout menu and choose margins and columns. It is important when you do this that you have both of your parent pages selected. When you select your parent pages, if you double click on the name, a parent, then you will have both selected. And I know that they're both selected because I can see them both highlighted in blue here on the right-hand side. If they aren't both selected, then you will be setting the margins and columns for one of those pages. But we really want this to be consistent, so I want to do this for all of my pages. In the margins and columns, I can see the parameters that are already set. If I want to change any of these, I can do that here. Note that you have a top and a bottom margin. In this case, I'm going to be adding a footer at the bottom, so I'm going to change my margin. I'm going to increase the size of that bottom margin a little bit, so I have a little extra room to put my footer in the margin. Rather than having a right margin and a left margin, I have an inside and an outside. And this is because we're working with facing pages. InDesign knows that we might want to adjust the inside margin where the page meets the binding to be a different size than we want the outside edges, right? So most common would be to decrease the inside a little bit or increase the outside margin. Remember that on the inside margins, you actually have two margins side by side. So you have the double width of what you think of as your margin between those two columns in the center. You might also, depending on your binding, adjust that. Today, I'm just going to keep it at 1/2 inch, and I'll keep my outside at 1/2 inch. So I have top, inside, and outside are all 1/2 inch, and I've added a little extra space at the bottom. I also have my columns, which I'm going to leave at 6. Now, these might be all the guides you give yourself, but as we saw in a previous video last week, an underlying grid can be really helpful. And it's not just the text columns, it's like having some vertical spacers as well. So I'm going to add guides using Create Guides. I don't need to worry about columns because I've already got them via my text columns, but I am going to add some rows. And let's see, I'm going to go for 8 rows. And it also has a gutter. That's the little space between. And I'm going to use these fit guides to margins. That means that it's going to take the space between my top and bottom margin and divide it evenly into those 8 rows. And that gives me something right now that's about a square, which is kind of what I'm looking for. All right, that's our basic grid. Okay, I can add by hand guides wherever I think they might be helpful. Because I'm going to put something in the footer of my page and I want to know where the edge of my content area or where my left and right margin or inside and outside margin are, I'm going to drag a new guideline. And to do that, I'm going to click on the ruler on the left-hand side. If you don't see your rulers, you can go up to the View menu and choose Show Rulers. If your rulers are visible, it'll say Hide Rulers here. All right, so I'm going to click in the ruler. I'm going to drag out to my left-hand margin and drop a guide. And what that does is it just adds a little bit of blue guideline at the top and bottom where it wasn't visible outside of my margins. Do the same thing on the other side. And I like to do it on the inside as well. When you do this, you'll note that these new guides are actually snapping to the margin guides that are already there, which is super helpful. Okay, so this is my grid, but I need some other things on this parent page in order to have a consistent, well, they call it a folio in magazine publishing. It's basically a header or a footer. And I'm going to do a footer in this margin space here. So let's zoom in. To create the footer, I'm going to first place a text box. So I'm going to take my type tool and I'm going to draw a box from one guideline to the other. It sort of stretches across the whole bottom of that page. And there are 3 things that you will usually find in the folio. One is going to be page numbers, the name of the publication, and the issue date or issue volume. Depends on the kind of publication it is, which of those would be more common. So I need a magazine name. You can choose any magazine name you like. I need my date. And then I need a page number. Page numbers are tricky. I don't want to type a number here. If I type a number, say the number 1, and I'm going to do this on the left-hand side. If I type the number 1, all my pages are going to be numbered page 1. So I don't want that. I definitely want to have what are called automatic page numbers. So I am going to put my cursor where I want the page number. And traditionally, most common is to have it at the outside corner. If it's at the outside corner, then when you flip through the pages, so imagine picking up a magazine and you flip through looking for a page number. I can see it because it is near the outside corner here. If it's in the center of your document, you're not going to see it as you flip through the pages. So I'm putting my cursor at the far left side here, and I am going to go up to the Type menu. There is a special way to insert automatic page numbers. If you don't do it this way, you will not actually have page numbers. So go up to the Type menu, go down to where it says Insert Special Character, and go to Markers. You'll see that these are all related to what page you are on or what page is before or after or the section. We are simply going to choose current page number because that's what we want to see in that corner there. Now, the funny thing is that what we actually are seeing here is an A. That's because we're on an A page, an A parent page. And that A is just a placeholder for the actual number. Okay, we'll preview that in a minute. But let's give this some style because right now this is just the default text and I don't want it to look like the default. I want it to have the pizzazz or the character that I am designing for my magazine. So I'm going to select everything here and go to my properties. Just make a few choices. Maybe I start with a bold. You know, think about like what would the magazine name look like on the front of your magazine on the cover? That would be kind of what you would see here or some simpler version of that. Probably don't need my date in bold, so we'll give that a different weight. And of course, the default font size is 12 point. That's really big for a little footer at the bottom of the page. In fact, this magazine that I have here as an example, I would venture to say these are about 8-point type in the footer. I'm not going to go quite that small. I think I might go with 9. Remember that this information is really, it is a wayfinding information. It helps people find the page, but it is not the content we want them to focus on when they're on the page. All right, so I'm pretty close here. I need to think about placement within the horizontal line of my footer. I can have it all to the left. I can use punctuation or visual marks to separate the page number, the magazine name, and the date. I can actually use tabs and spread them out across the document. I'm going to go ahead and use a tab to take the date over to the right-hand side or the center of the page. To set my tabs, I'm going to come up to the Type menu and choose Tabs. And I get this handy little ruler that appears right above my text box. I'm going to choose a right aligned tab, and then I'm going to click in the bar above the numbers. Right, that just places that little tab marker, and I can drag it around and adjust where it is. Whoops, there we go. I don't want it to go outside my box. I just want it to go right at the end. Now, if I place my cursor in front of my date and hit tab, it will align to the end of that box. Okay. So page number, magazine name. I think I might even make my page number not bold. Let's go back to regular. Okay. Now, I have created a footer with an automatic page number on my left-hand page. If we go out to our document and I click on page 2, so I'm going to double click on the page thumbnail. I can see that this says page 2, magazine name, and a date. If I click on page 4, double click, I can see page 4, magazine name, date. All good. But page 3, blank, nothing there. So let's go back to our parent pages again. And let's go ahead and copy this over to the other page. Now, I really like to use the Option command because I can drag it. So I'm going to click on my text box, hold the Option key and the Shift key, and drag this across to the other page. Now I have a copy of it. that is in the exact same vertical placement. I don't have to double check that I've got it aligned correctly. I was holding the shift key to make sure it stayed aligned, and the option key is what duplicates it. But I have a problem. When I duplicate that text box onto my right-hand page, the orientation of the content isn't quite right because now my page number is on the inside edge. So we just have to copy and paste and move things around a bit. I'm going to take the date, for example, use Command X to cut that, bring my cursor to the left-hand edge, and Command V to paste. I'm going to take my page number, Command X to cut, move it to the right, Command V to paste. And then I'm going to place my cursor before magazine because I want the magazine name to go with the page number over to the right-hand side. And I hit Tab. Now I just need to double check my tabs. So I'm going to go to my type menu, tabs. Hit that right-hand tab, bring it out to the edge of the box. And there we go. Just want to make sure it's aligned correctly. Right, so now I've got two mirrored text boxes, two mirrored footers where the left hand and the right hand have the same content, but just placed in the opposite direction so that they align with the outside edges of the page. And I can double check that by coming back out to my numbered pages. Page 3 says page 3, page 2 says page 2. Page 2 and 3 are the spread on which you're going to create your layout. But your parent page is going to apply to all the pages in your document. It's set up for the future when you might be creating and laying out many pages in your publication. Once you've reached this point, you have actually reached the stage where you are ready to submit your layout grid.